Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
But look at this, it's in French. I came across this by accident. It's in La Presse, which is a left-wing newspaper in Montreal. It takes massive handouts from Trudeau, by the way. It's a leader in that. Here's the story in French, but I'm going to show you the Google Translate version of it, which is pretty good. So I'll read it to you in English. Grant of $455,000, a helping hand from Ottawa for newspaper fund of conspiracy theories. Now, what conspiracy theories are they talking about? Is it the grand conspiracy theory unanimously promoted by the Canadian mainstream media for years that Donald Trump didn't actually win the 2016 election and that he was actually a Russian agent? Because that was quite a doozy, and pretty much every Canadian journalist promoted it, and many still do, even though it's been categorically refuted by a team of Democrats led by Robert Mueller after their massive inquiry. Maybe they're talking about a conspiracy theory that came true. I guess that wasn't a conspiracy theory, but a conspiracy fact. Here's a story from October from Trudeau's CBC state broadcaster saying not to believe reports that Trudeau was setting up mandatory quarantine detention facilities and hotels. That was all disinformation, they said. No truth to it, they said. Yeah, no, it was true, but incredibly, that CBC conspiracy theory story is still online without any retraction or correction. So is this the press story about the government funding those conspiracy theories? Is that what they're talking about? No. I'll tell you what it's about. Let me read. The Department of Canadian Heritage last March awarded a grant of $455,000 to the Epoch Times, a publication which, according to the majority of experts, has been promoting conspiracy theories for several years and which has become a forum for the movements of the far right. Oh, the Epoch Times, one of the few media outlets that is actually skeptical of Communist China, for example. They're the conspiracy theorists. And I love that phrase, the majority of experts say it's been promoting conspiracy theories. Can I see that list of experts? An expert in what? An expert in what's right and wrong, what's reasonable or what's not? There's no expert in charge of that. That's each of us using our own judgment. Who is this list of experts? How many are on it? And how do we know it's a majority? And who is not part of the majority? Who thinks, like, isn't that just a lazy way of a newspaper saying, we know better than you, just trust us. And since you don't trust us, we'll say experts say, but it's really just us couching our own opinions that way. That's called an appeal to authority. You have to believe us because we're important and we're experts. It's a logical fallacy. Let me read some more. The newspaper, which publishes an edition in 36 countries and in 22 languages, received a financial boost from Ottawa through the Canada Periodical Fund on 1st of April 2020, reveals the federal site. Again, I'm just reading from the Google translation here. The grant, which was awarded under a special component to support media affected by the crisis caused by the pandemic, ends March 31st. The newspaper's owner, the Epoch Times Media, also got a second financial boost from Ottawa through the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, according to the Canada Revenue Agency website, but it was impossible to know the extent of this financial assistance, the amount not being disclosed by the CRA. Okay, I got it. Suddenly, La Presse is against media bailouts. Yeah, no, they're not. They were actually amongst the most aggressive in lobbying for media bailouts and special tax treatment from the government. They just don't want people to disagree with them to get the same bailouts. That's all this is. I'll read some more. In the United States, the Epoch Times openly supported former United States President Donald Trump during his years in office, even receiving praise from a former close aide to Mr. Trump, Stephen K. Bannon, who claimed to be impressed by the newspaper's growing influence with right-wingers. Whoa! They openly supported the president? That's shocking. They should be ashamed to have a political point of view that's different from La Presse, a left-wing newspaper in a left-wing city, in a left-wing province, in the French language, in Canada. I mean, how dare the Epoch Times' American edition support the American president? That's all you got? Founded in 2000 in the United States by Chinese Americans affiliated with the spiritual movement Falun Gong, or Falun Dafa, the newspaper has been very critical of the Chinese Communist Party since its inception. Among other things, he accuses her, or it accuses, this is the translation again, of persecuting members of the spiritual movement in China. Are we still calling the persecution of the Falun Gong just an accusation? The press won't acknowledge it? What's going on here? I can't quite tell. Is the press saying that the Falun Gong people are not to be trusted, or that they really are not being persecuted by China? This isn't religious bigotry from the press, is it? This isn't just Chinese Communist Party talking points from the press, is it? Oh, this is my favorite. Last October, the New York Times ran a lengthy report about the newspaper's management, noting that it was one of the promoters of Spygate, a baseless conspiracy theory that Obama administration officials illegally spied on Mr. Trump's campaign in 2016. Yeah, no, that is not a conspiracy theory. That has been incontrovertibly proven true through not only declassified documents, but also by disciplinary measures taken against Obama officials who were involved in the illegal surveillance. That's not a conspiracy theory. Let me read some more. The Epoch Times also relayed other QAnon conspiracy theories on voter fraud and the Black Lives Matter movement. And during the pandemic, the newspaper focused on the unfounded theory that the coronavirus was engineered in a Chinese military laboratory at the instigation of the Communist Party of China. Well, there was voter fraud. How much there was is in dispute, I'll grant you that. I'm not sure about a conspiracy theory with the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't know what that is. The press never tells us. I don't know if they know. I've never heard that as part of the QAnon belief system. And I read that Epoch Times story that they mentioned about the theory that the coronavirus came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. It absolutely was a theory that the Epoch Times investigated. The press should investigate it too. Epoch Times was never conclusive about it. There are more questions than answers, but they talked about it like I guess the press is doing. So where's the scandal here? I'm still waiting for it. But my point is, instead of trying to defend Epoch Times point by point on these subjects, which is not really my job, I would say to all these questions by the press, so what? So what if the Epoch Times is wrong or right on all these issues? So what? Is the rule now that no newspaper is allowed in Canada if it deviates from the mushy left-wing pro-Trudeau, pro-China crud, the talking points that has reduced Canadian trust in media to an all-time low? Let's say the Epoch Times was wrong on every one of those things I just mentioned. So what? Isn't part of freedom of the press the right to be wrong? Isn't that part of a national discussion, figuring these things out together? Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing in the press. It's pretty embarrassing for the press, to be frank. But look at this comment from Stephen Guilbeault, the Heritage Minister in charge of the media bailout. The Minister of Canadian Heritage, Stephen Guilbeault, indicated that, quote, "It is undeniable that the past publications of the Epoch Times have conveyed prejudices and reproduced stereotypes against Asian communities, particularly on the internet. I strongly denounce it. The pandemic has exacerbated the effect of racism and hatred online on racialized communities. We are currently working on a bill that will specifically target hate speech on online platforms. However, he insisted that is not his role as minister, quote, to determine for Canadians what news content and opinions to read or avoid. As a government, our role is to act upstream to prevent, raise awareness, and educate about disinformation." What? This is a picture of Cindy Gu. She's the publisher of the Epoch Times in Canada. You may note she is ethnically Chinese. I know Cindy a little bit. She speaks with a Chinese accent, so I presume she was born there and is a refugee from there for religious reasons. This is a picture of Stephen Guilbeault. He has white privilege. He was convicted of a crime, and yet he sits in cabinet and calls Cindy Gu and other Chinese Canadians who work for the Epoch Times, he calls them anti-Asian? You can't make this stuff up. That's a conspiracy theory. But at least while he calls Cindy Gu and other Chinese Canadians who work at Epoch Times, while he calls them racist, this mansplaining, white-splaining liberal defames her. At least he's not calling for her to be cut off from the government teat. Enter Aaron O'Toole's Conservative MP. Let me read. Conservative MP Alain Rayes said he was outraged that aid was being given to this newspaper when community newspapers were closing their doors. How can the Minister of Canadian Heritage justify giving $455,000 to such a controversial newspaper? I am not questioning the existence of the newspaper, but the fact that the federal government is giving it money, while our community media are dying out, is completely, totally unacceptable. So the Liberal cabinet minister says he hates the Epoch Times. He calls them names. He mansplains to a woman and white-splains to an Asian Canadian. But at the end of the day, he says he will not censor them or shut them down. And the conservative critic, well, hold my beer, he says. He'll be the censor if the Liberals won't. That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.